Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast, a weekly podcast providing career and creative inspiration to help you build a purpose-filled life. If you're interested in tapping into your creative potential and building on your biggest and best resource, yourself, please join me on this path. I'm your host, Nancy Moore, and I want you to know that I'm on this journey with you. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be bringing you a podcast today that is with one of my great podcasting friends here in Tulsa, Amy Siegfried. Her podcast is called Sports Curious, and Sports Curious is a game changer. Literally, I guess that's kind of a pun too, but it helps level the playing field for those who don't have the time or interest in following athletics by providing a quick dose of content on trending topics. So check her podcast out. It's Sports Curious, and I think that you will enjoy her witty personality and the information that she shares. It's very tight and concise and will be helpful for you. So check that out. Our conversation talks about supporting younger entrepreneurs. It talks about her podcast and then also why she's a master of small talk. So sit back and relax, or maybe you're walking or on the way to work. Enjoy this conversation that I had with Amy Siegfried. Okay, hi everybody. I'm Nancy Moore with the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast, and this is Amy Siegfried with Last Night's Game, which is an awesome podcast. And I happened to meet Amy at an event where we visited with Alyssa Rosenheck, who I've interviewed, who's phenomenal. And Amy and I happened to connect because we both have podcasts. And so anyway, we have been connecting now for a little while, and I invited her on the podcast, so I'm so happy to have her here today. So Amy, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. We get to hang out and have coffee, but we're actually official business now.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Good. I love it because I have wanted to share your podcast and you really with people. I love the podcast. I love the concept. And actually, while we're on that, if you will share with people about the concept of Last Night's Game, and on the premise of I heard you say this quote, and it may have been a TED Talk, and I'll talk about that later, but you have to be at the table to play. So I want you to kind of talk about that.
Thanks for queuing that up perfectly.
Yeah.
So Last Night's Game was an idea I had, it was probably 18 years ago now. So I was working in Major League Baseball, and I was in my early 20s. And I realized that none of my girlfriends knew anything about sports. And it really wasn't that you had to know the box score, but they didn't know anything about sports. And that to me was such an advantage that I had in my career to be able to go out and network and meet with people and just have that little nugget of information that was a conversation starter. And so I thought, gosh, there's so many interesting things about the world of sports that have nothing to do with the score. So how do we share those? And my brother, who is my sports guru, so I called him and said, hey, I've got this idea. How do we teach women and those who don't know a lot about sports and what's happening in the world? And how do we share that message? And he was like, look, lady, you work 60 hours a week, and I'm in high school, so that's not going to work.
Oh, he was in high school?
He was still in high school.
Okay.
And so he was like, I don't know what you're working on here, but that's not going to work. And so it was something we sort of just tabled. And it wasn't until about 14 years later when we were moving back from Singapore to the United States, and I was moving right around Thanksgiving, and I knew no one was hiring between Thanksgiving and New Year's, and I couldn't find anything. So at Thanksgiving, I said, well, what do you think if we just give this a go? And so we started Last Night's Game, and so we are a tri-weekly email publication that comes at about a 3-minute read 3 times a week in your inbox, and that was by design. We want it to be short and sweet because people don't have a lot of extra time.
Smart.
I want it to be every I guess not every other day, but I want it to be Monday, Wednesday, Fridays because I want people to have a chance to digest the information in it. Because for me, and we all see this, we read the news or something in the morning and you catch 1 or 2 nuggets out of it. And then it starts over again the next day. So we try to find those topics that are something that resonate over a day or two that you can think about and be able to share that. So that's kind of why we did that. And then, gosh, probably 2 years after we started, I had a bunch of friends who said, hey, I love what you do, but I don't have time to read. I'm on school drop-off, then I'm in the office, and I don't have time for all that. Could you do a podcast? And I thought, well, okay, if that's what the people want. And so the podcast is once a week, 5 minutes. It's called Sports Curious. And once again, the whole idea is to give that little nugget of something to just chat about and have a conversation starter, because I find that sports are one of those things that even if you bring it up, whatever that might be, it's the Super Bowl or something like that, but then you can take that topic into something else. You can talk about food or music or travel. They all intertwine so easily. And so even if you're not a sports fanatic, you can say, hey, did you see XYZ? Did you see that? Do you know that Tom Brady's a vegan? That's pretty interesting. Or like, what kind of food do you like? Where do you like to eat? Where do you like, when you travel, what kind of restaurants do you seek? It turns into an easy way to dive into a different conversation. So
I love that you said that, because you have talked about how I don't know if you enjoy it, but you're good at small talk.
Thank you. I don't know. It depends. You know, my career, so I really worked in community relations so when I worked for the Arizona Diamondbacks, I did community relations and foundation work. And so I spent most of my career there going to social events, going to charity events and different things. And sometimes there were 3 or 4 events a day. And that to me just got so old. It really, really did. You really get tired about talking about the weather or what's new. And so I think that for me, last night's game helps arm me with those topics that makes the small talk a little bit easier. And coming out of COVID, I don't know about you, but I didn't know how to small talk after COVID. It kind of went away.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
It really did. I was someone who like me who does it a lot. I really struggled with, wait, what do I talk to people about? I don't want to talk about COVID and vaccines because that's all controversial. So, but no one's been doing anything. So, you know, you might say like, what's your COVID hobby? But I was really missing that.
Yeah.
My brain wasn't functioning that way yet. And so it has been good to have sort of do this for work, but it also helps me in everyday situations. Holiday seasons is fantastic because you think about it, you know, we joke, but when I moved here, someone said to me that 3 things you're going to talk about at parties here: the weather, OU football, and OSU football. And so I was like, okay, I've got to sort of get my life together and learn about football here. And so that's kind of those, if you're armed with those little nuggets, they help.
So much of it is pop culture, though.
Right, it is. That's exactly it.
And so I love, though, your podcast when you're talking about maybe getting into the conversation, but then changing the conversation to something that you're comfortable with and you know more about. Because then, you know, if you're talking about Chicago and the Chicago Bulls, and then you talk about, you know, what's your favorite restaurant in Chicago?
Where do you like to get your deep dish pizza? Because we know that's a controversial statement in Chicago.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's just so much more to sports, and I love the pop culture weave in. You know, J-Lo and A-Rod were like our dream come true, or Super Bowl, because it's something everyone can relate to, and something people read in magazines, and whether you know pop culture or not. And I always tell this story. A friend introduced me to someone really high up, I think it was at the AP, in sports. And he and I met for drinks when I was in New York, and we were chatting, and he's talking all about like the 1960 or 1970 Boston Red Sox, which I know nothing about. Clearly, that is just not my wheelhouse. So I sort of just did the best I could of, okay.
I feel like my eyes would glaze over.
They did glaze over. Mine did too. And then it got into the Yankees Red Sox controversy. But I said, okay, I've been to Fenway. I sat on the Green Monster. That was really cool. So tell me about what you like about Fenway. Where should I have gone to eat, or what even in New York? So I tried to spin that, and it still cycled back to the 1970s Red Sox. But I kept trying to like make that connection of, let's get out of this realm that I clearly have no experience in whatsoever. And so, but it was fun because at least it gave me a little more context.
So in your podcast and in your life, you're very entrepreneurial, but I want to ask you about what drives you. Like, what drives you to do what you're doing every day, and what inspires you? And so if you could share that.
Sure. I think for me, one of the biggest things that gives me this boost for what we do is I really love to create. And I think that's something I never knew I had because I worked in the corporate world, and you were sort of stuck in what this should look like. And so I really do love to create and grow. One of the things that I do is I'm a member of Irish Angels, which is an angel investing group. And I love looking at businesses or working and doing business plan competitions and different things where you're a judge on those. Because I love seeing what people are creating and how you can help them fine tune what they're doing. And that drives me, but also those notes we get from people who say, hey, thanks, you helped me on this. You helped me with that. I'm really excited that now I watch F1 races because I learned about it from your podcast. And so those nuggets help. But I come from I'm a third generation entrepreneur. And for me, that was something I always saw, but it looked so much different. And entrepreneur was a word. My dad is a mechanic and owned his garage. And so he was a small business. He wasn't an entrepreneur. That really wasn't a word back when he started.
Right.
And so you watched, I was aware of the commitment and the sort of the hard work that comes with being an entrepreneur, and it never scared me because I watched what he did.
I mean, really hard work.
And when you realize
that paycheck for, your family.
Right. It's really hard work. Exactly. And for me, it's nice because I can be a little more flexible, right? I get up very early and I work. When I went back and did my MBA I finished in 2021. It was nice for me to be able to, I'd get up and work in the morning and get my son to school. I'd work all day. I'd get everybody home. We'd get dinner. We'd get some time together. And then I'd work after he went to bed. And so for me, I love that ability to kind of flex as I need to. As we've had a lot of snow days and COVID quarantines and all the things that we've had, in the past couple of years, it's challenging because you only get done what you need to, but there is that flexibility of saying, okay, I can figure this out and make it work. And so it's, it has its pluses and minuses. I mean, you really have to be prepared. What I struggle with at the end of the night is going to bed and knowing that there are 17 other things on your to-do list and big projects that will help your business and help you drive, and going to bed knowing that you didn't get those done today. That's really hard for me to do, but it's something, we have to sleep at some point. And so that was something I struggled with during school because there were only so many hours in a day. But
when you say we have to sleep at some point, I do wonder because you have a lot on your plate. So how you do unplug, like how do you kind of step away and more than just sleep? Like what you do to unplug.
Well, I definitely have not been sleeping, but that's a whole other can.
Oh no.
But it's one of those. That's something I still struggle with all the time, and especially it probably took me after I finished my MBA. It probably took me 6 months to give myself the credit of, it's okay if you go to bed tonight at like 10 o'clock and you climb into bed and you read a book. That's okay. You don't have to work till midnight.
Yeah.
And during school, I was probably running on like 4 hours of sleep, 3 to 4 hours of sleep, and which didn't benefit me at all. It made me not as good partner. I wasn't as good parent because I was, you have a short fuse. You're tired. You're exhausted. And so what I've started to try to do is give myself a night where especially it helps my husband travels a lot, where I go take a bath after I put our son to bed, or I just do something. I read a book. Well, I feel like I'm being constructive. I'm reading something. So that still makes that part of my brain that feels like it needs to be doing something. But it's just, I try to do those things that I would never have done before. I shut down my laptop. I really try to shut down my laptop by 9. Some days that works and some days it doesn't work. And that's okay. I mean, I think there's a balance of all of it, but I try to just give myself me time. And I did start, I really do try to work out every single day, because that just breaks some sort of sweat. I don't care if you lay there and do a stretching class, but something that gives me my time and that little window of protected space that I do my best to protect, but it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always work. And, you get a phone call and it's like, oh, it's a quarantine week. Okay, never mind. All the things you had planned and all the relaxation or the time you had for yourself goes out the door. But you just, living overseas, I think we both learned that we started just using the term, it is what it is. So we say, my mom used to make fun of me like, how is that an answer? It is what it is. It's like, but it is. Sometimes you just have to go throw your hands up in the air and go, okay, we'll figure it out. Okay.
That's not sweating the small stuff.
That's exactly it. You can't.
I love that.
You can't get overstroked about things that you really can't change. And there's nothing you can do about it. And trying to prioritize that golden time between dinner and bed and bath time for me is so wonderful. And sometimes it's 20 minutes and sometimes it's an hour and sometimes it doesn't exist. But I love that time where as a family, the three of us get to sit there and build magnet tiles or whatever our son wants to do. And that is so important to just have that little nugget of time. But also remember that 15 minutes is okay. Sometimes you're not going to be able to give 2 hours or take an afternoon off from school and go do something. And so I try to remember to my head, and the mom guilt is so huge, that we're doing something together, regardless of if it's 15 minutes or it's 2 hours. You know, as kids, we don't remember what that was. We just knew mom and dad played with us. So,
yeah. Okay.
That was a really long-winded
answer.
I
like it. Okay. So I'm wondering how you define success and what you think of the word success.
You know, it's a really, as a word, it's really interesting because everyone obviously has their own opinion. And what success looks like. Some days that success is you put on clothes and you got out the door. Sometimes success is you have a great interview with someone like Nancy and you get to be on this great podcast. And, you know, it's really funny. When I first started school, I was in Chicago, I went to the University of Notre Dame Chicago campus. And I landed an interview for Super Bowl on Good Day Chicago. And I thought, okay, this is I think it's the second or third largest TV market. And I was so amped and it went really well. It was great. You know, I get back to class and my teacher even like showed my interview in class, which was so sweet. And it was like, okay, we did something great. But then the next day it's like, okay, get back to the grind. And so success for me is doing something great, but also sustaining and really truly, I hate to say like being happy, but being fulfilled. I think there's that, you know, when you go to bed at night, do you feel like you did something good today? Do you feel like you made a difference? Do you feel like you made yourself a little bit better? And so for me, it's more fulfilling than success, because success can be so many things to so many different people. And if you make $1 million, does that make you successful? And not necessarily, maybe not compared to someone else. And we always say in our house, there's always someone smarter, richer, and prettier. So you just like deal with your own stuff and you build yourself up the way you need to, because with Instagram and all the social media, it's so hard not to compare yourself of what someone else's success looks like. Because there's might be followers or, you know, that might be whatever that might be. And so for me, it's compare yourself to yourself. And it's hard to do. It's really hard to do. But, you know, at the end of the day, if I feel successful at what I did and I can put my head on my pillow and attempt to go to sleep, then okay. Then I think that's a successful day, and how you needed to do whatever that is. And, you know, truly, if my family's happy and, you know, I'm doing my job and I'm fulfilling what I say I'm going to do. And that's a big thing for me, is doing what I say I'm going to do. That is a huge piece of.
You're good about. I will say, in the time I've known you, you are very good about that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really important to me, and that's how my parents raised me. My husband's very much the same way, and so, you know, success looks like all those things. But did you fulfill what you said you're going to do, and do you feel fulfilled? I mean, if your family is safe and happy and growing and flourishing, then you've done a good job. If you're doing the same with your business and you're giving back, I think that's all a huge piece of the success. And it's not just money, right? It's not just Instagram followers. It's not just, you know, do you look good in a bikini? Like, none of those things. Those things don't always matter. And so everyone's got their own version of that. If I was a bodybuilder, looking good in a bikini would probably be important. Yeah, but I'm not. So
me neither. I know. Okay, so I asked you about success because, and I don't know what you want to share with me, but I am going to share with people a little about your background. Okay. And that is flying around the world. Was it you and your husband? Flew around the world in 58 minutes and how many?
58 hours.
58 hours. Sorry. 58 hours.
And I 23 minutes or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. And you have done a TED Talk. You did a TEDx talk, which was awesome. I'll tell you, I saw that. And that's a lot for somebody to have accomplished at this point. And so I'm just wondering what you have on your bucket list and, you know, what's next for you.
Sure. You know, interesting. I might dive back just on something I was thinking about for our last question. I think the imposter syndrome, which is so interesting. You talk about the TED Talk and those things being accomplishments where when it's yours, you think, okay, I did this, check, done, let's move on down the line.
Yes.
And so I think that is something that resonates so huge for me.
Yes.
How do I get to be the point where Nancy wants me to be on her podcast? That's fantastic. I feel so appreciative. And, you know, when I walked into my EMBA class and it was all these really smart people. I'm not like a math smart person. I don't do finance. That's why I went back to get my MBA. I was like, why did they let me in? This is crazy. So it's just one of those that I think a lot about how we continue to build ourselves up, and things like the TEDx talk and the flying 58 hours around the world. I don't recommend that. It was exhausting. I think my face peeled from being dehydrated for like a week after that, which was just like this weird side effect of, because we only slept on the plane. But what's next on the bucket list? You know, my bucket list is really probably a lot of travel.
Okay.
That's like really what my husband and I really love to travel.
Yeah.
And so there are definitely some places that I would love to go. Jordan, Egypt, some of the places that I really haven't had a chance to see. Living in Asia, we got a chance to check out some great places, but I'd love to dive in and get kind of into the inner workings of those. But I think growing a business and continuing to dive in and help others succeed, and for me, that's what I love about Irish Angels. I get to invest in and help businesses grow financially, but we're also plugged in and helping them. They do a really great job of asking for help that those portfolio companies need. So it's, okay, we need someone to help with this or that. And so I'm usually just that person that says, yes, I want to help someone grow. And that's just how my brain works. I want to watch things create and grow.
Yeah, you are somebody that is like that and is a cheerleader for people. But I want you to kind of talk about the importance of networking and building your community, because I feel like I'm so fortunate, but I feel like you're in my community now. Yes. And I want people to kind of hear from you about why building a community is important, a good community around you, but that has to do, with networking as well.
And I think that for me, it really started, I went to Arizona State University for undergrad, and I stayed in a dorm that had 1,000 people. My high school didn't have 1,000 people, and I knew no one. And so you really had to get out there and try to figure out how to get into it and create a network. And at college, it's a network of friends, but that's still your support system. And moving to Tulsa, it was really important for me to try to figure that out. And it was really hard to do because I didn't have any children. And so it was hard to, as an adult, and anyone who's moved as an adult understands it's hard to get into different things. You don't have that school connection. You don't have kids, and it was really hard for me. And so what I would say, networking is so key, but being yourself as you network. And it was really interesting. A business we listened to pitch at a meeting in Chicago last week. It's a beekeeping business, for lack of a better description. But she was the president of the Beekeepers Club at Indiana University. So there's something for everyone. Find what that niche looks like. What can you dive into that's interesting to you? Because the more you get to be your authentic self, the more you're going to create a genuine community around you. Because that community is really important. When you have a really bad day, especially as a parent, it's so important when you have a bad day to have someone say, you know what, I really just did not show up today. And it was a rough day as a parent. I yelled at my kid. I maybe cried. Whatever it might be, all those things exist and all those things happen. And so I look at it, the more you can network and build an authentic network. And I think network has such a bad, can have such a bad connotation to it, because people think sales and you're going to be approached by all these people. But if you do it authentically and you make the relationships, those sales will come. And all those things will happen, but make those genuine connections with people that you want to be friends with. And I think there's the people that maybe you don't want to be friends with, but you want to have at least a business relationship with. And I think it dives into mentorship and all these different things. It's, for me, I've built this great community, and I've worked really hard in creating friends and groups of friends and business associates, and I'm really terrible at using them, to be quite honest. I'm terrible at calling and saying, hey, Nancy, can you help me on this PR thing? Because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not very good at that at all. And so I'm trying to get better because we all want to help each other. And one of the things I'm really striving to do beyond getting better about asking for help is helping those who are younger than me come up through their career and give them some structure and advice, because it's confusing. It's hard. And I didn't have a lot of great female mentors going through my career. I had one really fantastic boss, but I really struggled with women throughout my career. We don't tend to be that nice to each other. And so for me, it's really important to say, how can I help you? Do you have questions? We have a lot of younger friends who are getting married. It's like, how can I be present? And I had a babysitter say, can you just help me look at my registry? What am I supposed to put on that? Yeah, I'm happy to do that. You have a career question? Yeah, I'm happy to help you with that. I think it's really just important to be available for those weird questions, because we all have them. And like, how am I supposed to, what am I supposed to do with this? And so I think it's really, for me, that's a key thing, is being something that I couldn't find and helping that person do that. But I think that's continuing to network, and it steps back to they're making the ask of me to be able to do that. And so don't be afraid to ask too. I think that's really an important piece of that, is we all do this together. We all grow together. And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in the corporate world, or whether you stay at home, it doesn't matter. We all do this together, and we all need to be able to pick each other up and go. So network, be your genuine self is my biggest thing. I've never been as happy since I've been my genuine self, because you try so hard to create this person that you think people will like.
Yes.
But then you just don't show up for you.
Yeah.
And so when you get to be your genuine self and be your little bit crazy here or there, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
I think it's so important. It's such a great way to just live your life and go. But I give my credit to my husband for that, because he's the one who really taught me that that's okay, because he is his own authentic self. Anyone who knows him knows he's his own person. I
haven't met him yet.
Oh boy, you're in for a treat. And so I really learned that from him, because I thought, that's
awesome.
People love him, and he's a fantastic human, but he's himself. And I think there's something so great to learn and see that.
So speaking of people who are themselves, I love Water Me Wednesday.
Thank you.
And I want you to tell people about Water Me Wednesday, and then maybe something you have learned from Water Me Wednesday.
Okay. So Water Me Wednesday turned out, I was doing it on Instagram, and it was basically the day I remembered to water my plants. I am a horrible plant person. I have killed everything.
I have that over there. I have one other plant, but yeah.
It's a little succulent.
Yeah.
But I kill those too, because I would overwater them or underwater them. I'd forget. And so I started reminding myself to Water Me Wednesday, water my one plant I had. And I was like, I'm going to make this plant live. It's still alive. And so that turned into, people were like, well, what about like if it was there's like a wine Wednesday and all these different things. And the person who helps us with social media was like, what if you turn that into some sort of weekly segment of something where people could learn water, make cocktails, maybe it's food, but somehow water and fulfill your soul a little bit. And so that kind of morphed into watering plants, then making cocktails and trying different things. I think my brother and I did one where we tried different dairy-free ice creams. That was kind of hilarious. We both separately, because he lives in Las Vegas, and so we both separately picked up food and did it over Zoom. It was kind of funny. But that's turned into meeting new and really interesting people just like you do, saying, what can you teach our community? And what can we learn about? And there's so many great women, Rachel and teaching us about brain code centers and mind mapping, and Amanda Neely teaching us about interior design, and Stephanie Harris, who I'm going to have come back, teaching us about nutrition for children. Oh, yeah. And that one was so interesting because I learned stuff for myself too. But it's morphed into this great way to share and fulfill something interesting in our lives. And so what have I learned from that? I've learned that Zoom is really a pain sometimes to record things on. That is a thing. But I've learned that the questions and some of the best interviews I've had are the ones I'm just super curious. I maybe don't ask those standard questions, but you're just so curious. You get in there and you're like, okay, so tell me why you figured out how to do this. And like Molly Cottle with Ashlinger, it was Melissa. It's like, tell me why you started making candy and tell me the process. And
that was a good one, yeah.
She was just so interested. Yeah. And I don't know anything about making candy. I just buy it at the store. And so it's finding those interesting people that other people will also find interesting. So
Okay. I love that. I love it. Okay, so the time has flown, but I have one last question for you, and it's what you're passionate about right now.
I would say that I am passionate right now, probably like we talked about cultivating that next generation, and that starts with my child, and in giving him the opportunity to grow and be curious. That's helping anybody who really needs that next step and that next cultivation to make it to the next step. And sometimes that's, someone in their 20s who's doing starting a new job. Maybe it's a business through Irish Angels or through one of my business plan competitions that I work on. Maybe it's them helping them grow as well, or providing marketing information or help. And so it's one of those, it's really diving in and really helping lift the next generation.
I love that.
Thank you.
Okay. That's awesome. You are a quality person.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Very, very awesome.
Watch for dancing on Water Me Wednesday.
Okay. I hope. Okay. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Okay, everybody. That's a wrap on this week's episode. I want to thank you for listening to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. It means the world to me, and I'd love to connect with you. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter at Passion Sharing. Also, if you like this podcast, it would mean a lot to me for you to subscribe, rate, and review it. And as always, all my show notes will be available on my website, sharingpassionandpurpose.com.